Hey guys, welcome back. This is the final part of our intro to writing a custom indicator for Tradovate. I had some thoughts or things that I wanted to share, some tips when I ended the last video, and I think it would be beneficial to make sure that I get that out there as you're getting started on your journey of writing and modifying indicators. That it's good to know things that I wish I had done from the beginning, at least the main thing. So before we get down with that, go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and also give me a thumbs up. That really helps with the algos and whatnot for YouTube, and then also leave a comment. Just some engagement metrics would be useful. Even a thumbs up in the comment itself. What else? Let's so the tip. I don't know if I mentioned it in my 1 minute opening rambling, but we're going to talk about source control and how we can use that to our advantage in this particular setup with Tradovate. If you've seen me, well, if you follow along, you will notice that the Tradovate editor is fairly limited in terms of what you can and can't do. For instance, you can search for a file within the current file. Let's say I have a function called body portion. I can search for that, but if I had another function in a different file of mine, I can't globally search. Let's say I had something in this file and I wanted to say, how do I use typical price, but I'm in this, other file. Well, there's no, global search that you can do. Most, integrated development environments, IDEs for other programming languages would have that. And the reason you obviously would need it is if you have as many indicators as I have, in this list, you've done something somewhere at some point in time. You just don't remember where. And so it would be nice to globally search for that. So to solve that problem, what we're going to do is we're going to, let me pull this up. We're going to go to github.com and we're going to sign up for an account. So just follow their prompts here. Just sign up. I've already signed up, so I'm going to go ahead and log into that account. I'll be right back on that. Give me a second. Okay. All right. So we're in my GitHub, and I have a couple files in here. So here's a previous bar retracement. This is the code I uploaded. Again, if you were in the main file itself, you can search for, let's say, body portion. Actually, let me increase the font size of this one. Okay. So, if you're starting a new file at some point in time, you want to search for a function called body portion because you had the name of the method and you remember that much. You just don't quite remember where it was. And by searching that, you're able to come up to the exact file that you had, and you could go to the code and say, oh, okay, that's where I have it, and that's where I, use it right there. Oh, perfect. I'm going to copy, let's say, this much. So that's benefit number one of using GitHub for source control. So let's go ahead and pretend we're starting a new file. I'm going to go ahead and add a file. So click here, drop down, and let's call the one we have lc demo3.js, and then just click down here. Now I'm going to switch back to Tradovate code. I'm going to select all and copy. Go back to our GitHub and paste it in. So here's our, let me scroll back up because I was using keyboard shortcuts. I just want to make sure you can all see that. So make sure you're in the right repository. And, there's probably YouTube videos and other things that'll walk you through on how to create a GitHub account, a GitHub repository. This particular one's public, but you can also create private repositories so that I have a public and a private one, just so I can keep all my personal and other investigative stuff and whatnot in that repository. So we're creating a new file called that, and we've pasted in our code, and we scroll down, and then you commit a file. And when you commit a file, you're just saying, let's check this in to the repository, and then we're going to give it a comment so that if we have to come back later, we'll know, um, and we'll know what changes were in that particular point in time or in that commit. So the customary initial commit is usually in there, copied working code from Tradovate, and created this file. And then I'm going to go ahead and commit this directly to the master branch. You know, in the future, as you make changes, you can also branch the code and so forth. We're not going to cover that here. I would recommend you learn more about it, about code branching and all the other, benefits of using Git and GitHub. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and commit that file. And you'll see we have a new file called lcdemo3 with a comment of initial commit that happened just now. So that's great. Now you can go in, and I'll go ahead and make a change here. We'll do it on the master branch. Again, the more correct way is probably to branch your branch. So what that means is the master is where your final code will go to. So if you have working ideas, let me go ahead and quickly a branch. If I want to create a new branch and I say work in progress, or just make it whip, and then I will go ahead and click create branch, and then it'll take everything that's currently in master, the master view of things, it'll branch it, and you'll see the name is whip there, and now you can start making changes without affecting anything else. So if I was to go ahead and change this, and let's just add a comment like slash slash for single line comment, say this is my test changes, and I'm going to go ahead and just scroll down to the bottom. Again, give it a comment like test changes. You don't have to add it more description, and I'm going to commit it directly to the work in progress branch. I'm going to save that. And now your changes, so it hasn't been committed to master, it was in a separate branch. So that's, again, this is a little more complicated and time consuming topic for me to go ahead and discuss right now. I just kind of want to show you a brief overview of how you can use it in terms of learning how to use it, or how you can use it, I guess, from the perspective of Tradovate indicators. You will have to then learn more online about using GitHub to your advantage. So what we can do now is make a pull request. And this allows us to see the changes between our working branch, which is whip, and our master branch. So I'm going to go ahead and do a pull request. And we'll just call it, test pull request. Um, it could be whatever, because you're working by yourself. But if you're collaborating with others, whether you end up starting your own community of or a repository of community indicators, that'd be great. You create the pull request, and now it will say you want to merge the things that are in the whip branch into the master branch. And you can see that how many commits were in there, so what changes were put in. You can click, again, you can explore this and figure out what they do, but it can show you the details and also what actually changed. So anything in green would be new code. Anything in red, if there's any, would be code that you removed between versions, between the old and the new. And then anything that's not either of those colors are unchanged code. But if we go back to the main pull request itself, what we can do is we can see which files changed as well. So if there was a lot of files, you can obviously go there. And then you come in here. Again, you see the files change, but if there were multiple files, you'll see them all listed, and then you could decide, I want to go ahead and, comment. So if you're collaborating with somebody, this is where you would say, I need more info before I can approve, things of that sort. Or you can approve it if you, again, are working with multiple people. But if you're working by yourself, you can still use this whole flow, this Git flow of, branching, putting in commits and then doing pull requests so that you can come back later, especially if like me, you have a busy work schedule and you get to work on some of your code every now and then. You want to be able to have versions along the way that you can either see what you did change, because a lot of times you'll add a little bit at a time, which is probably the best way to do anything with Tradovate. And then you can come here and do a pull request to see what changes were actually done before you merge into master. Because once it gets into master, then you know that work, that feature or whatever changes you're putting in is completed. So, and it doesn't even have to be big changes, for you to go this flow. One of the things I have experienced with Tradovate, unfortunately, is that I will lose my code. So I'll be writing, a bunch of changes, and then I save it. I go out, look at it, and it doesn't look right. I come back into the code, and all my changes are gone. And I think that's partly because of their whole cloud. They store all your code in the cloud, and during the syncing up and down, you may lose your version of the code that you just added. So what I like to do is when I make changes, for instance, one of the things we added, let me make sure, we added last time was we commented this out, right? So before we left, I talked a little bit about global class, global level class, global level method versus class level methods. And we had changed this to be called body class. And then we reference it this way, this. So I'm going to just go ahead and repeat those changes real quick. So I'm going to copy that, put it into the, and then I'm going to uncomment this code. So just get the formatting right. Okay, then anywhere I'm using body portion, I want to change it to body portion class with a this prefix, and I only use it in 2 places. All right. So the other thing I'm going to do is change my defaults. Oh, I've already done that. I've changed my default 50% line to be a width of 3, my 382 line to be Dodger blue and also width of 3, and my 618 line to be Dodger blue and also width of 3. So what I like to do is I'll save it, and then especially, and now this is true especially if you have a lot of changes, I would select all, copy it, go to Tradovate, GitHub, go back to your branch. So what you'll need to do when you're in the pull request, you'll have to come back, change the branch here. So go back to your repository in the drop down, change it to your working branch if you're using branching. Go to the file in question, and now click this pencil icon on the right. When that comes up, you could select all in here and then paste. And you can see that, we comment out this code. Actually, that needs to be that. And then made these changes, right? So now we're going to save that and say moved body portion to class level. Okay, I'm going to save that. Then what I'll do, I know it's tedious, but this is really, if you're making a small change, you probably don't need to worry about this, because if you had to do it again, it's not a big deal. But if you had a lot of changes and they're crucial changes, you want to make sure that you do this. Okay, so, all right, so I'm going to save that, and no compilation errors. Then what I can do is go ahead here and remove that. We're going to go ahead and add it back in, make sure everything's good, and that's it. So we're going to go ahead and save and make sure that works. Okay, it works. Now, what if we wanted to revert that change? What we'll want to do is obviously go here, go to edit, and notice this was commented out and we have this here. What we can do is go back to Tradovate, And we said, you know what, the work in progress branch, I don't really need any of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to master. And there's other ways to get at this, but I want the master version of LCDemo.js. I always like to hit the edit tool. You don't have to, but that way I can go in and get the, you can even cancel the changes actually and go raw. And this will show you the raw file itself, and you select all and copy it. Go back to Tradovate, select all, and then paste it back in, and you can see that this is commented back in. We don't have a version in this space here, and this is called body portion again. I'll go ahead and save this. Oops. And exit out and remove it just to make sure, add it back in. And then before I actually commit this or add this indicator by clicking save, I'm going to go ahead and look at the code again to make sure, with syncing issues and whatever. So it looks like we got back to where we needed to be. We're going to go ahead and save that. And actually, I'm going to turn this off. And that's it. So that's the first tip, is how to use GitHub. I would practice with it, figure out what works for you. Again, syncing issues, writing. I have indicators that there's close to 1,000 lines or more of code, and sometimes I'll make a couple dozen, couple hundred lines change, whether it's like copy one section, paste it in, make modifications, and so forth. There's nothing worse than coming up with the right logic and then losing it and being really, really frustrated. Now there you can also do Git locally on your machine if you wanted to. I just like GitHub because if you want to collaborate with others and so forth, and also it's free and even with private repositories, it's free. And then you can look at the code anywhere else or point people to here. So that's another. Maybe I'll go into this. If you want to say, hey, I want somebody asks you, how do I do something? How do I draw a line segment? What I can do is come here and click copy permanent link. And then I can share that with somebody, say through Discord or YouTube channel. And by going here, this link here will take them to that exact file at the exact point highlighted. And they can just start, saying, oh, okay, that makes sense. I can go ahead and copy this code and use it in my own. So that's the benefit of having um, it publicly available through a web app such as GitHub, is that you can share quicker without having to, upload the file to, some service, them downloading it and so forth. The other thing I guess we can work on is in the indicator itself. And so what I had mentioned last time was that these options for the different retracement, they're kind of cluttered, right? We want like retrace %2 is next to line opacity 1. It would be nice if anything that's dealing with 0, 2 was on its own and separated for anything with, separated from the 0, 1 options and the 0, 3 options. One way to do that, and you might have seen this in some of my code, is that you use enums. So what we can do is, and I'm going to copy this from a different code that I have, but so let's say we want the show only last bar option to be by itself. Then we can add something called, and I like to, the name of the property doesn't really matter. It doesn't get used, but I like to name it. You can say divider 1. And then what you want to do is use the enum options of param specs. And then in there, you can just have a string. So this one just has dashes. So let me make 3 of those, and then we'll come and modify them once we see it. So this is retrace 1 options, retrace 2. And then what we want to do is make sure we give it a unique name in the properties. All right, save that. We'll close that and then go and view this. We may have to, if you've just added it, you will have to select them to actually for it to appear. And I think that's it right there. So now our options are kind of divided up, you know. So you can see why I would name it more than divider one if you want to give it a better name. You can see some of that. So I'll go ahead and make that change. And the way, you know, so this is maybe another tip that you may have already noticed. When you name something in the Tradovate params, their platform will take the name in camel case and make it into with like a space between that and then capitalize all the letters. So for the divider, we can say divider for retrace 01, and then, you know, and so on. We'll leave the other two as that. Now instead, you can have multiple enum options, and the enum is just gets rendered as a drop down on the Tradovate user input, where they can customize the indicators. So instead of doing dashes, you can do, and make sure you have the right commas in here. So you can see on the very far edge, I have a comma. But what we can instead of doing that, and then you also have to have a unique name. You know, I just use S for spacer, but and then T would be anything else. But what you can do is you can write text here that says things like, you know, let's make it retrace options um, for the first line, something along those lines. You can call it whatever you want. And then if you comment this out for now, and that's a valid, you know, thing to do is commenting things out in the middle of that. We'll save that. I'll X out and then X this out again. We'll have to come back in and then choose that option. So this is what the user would see. Actually, let me go ahead and remove the indicator and re-add it because it's a default value. You only see default values when you add it for the first time. If you're changing code for an indicator that's already added, you don't get the default values. So you can see now that we've re-added it. Okay, so this is the bug where your code doesn't show up for whatever reason. There's some syncing issues. You can see our dropdown doesn't appear here. I know it's there. It's on the server because we just looked at it, but somehow when you are trying to add it, it's pulling from a different version than the one you just made a change to. But I know for a fact that if you save this and then you go back in to edit it, you will now see it. It's just, it's frustrating. So that's why for me, I like to use GitHub source control, copy everything unless it's minor changes. And then make sure, even if you copy it into Notepad or a local, you know, text editor on your machine, just to make sure your changes are there. Now, I bet you if I log out and log back in, this will show up the first time. But you can also see reasons why I had dashes for my first option, because what that does is it stretches this drop down box out. It stretches it to the point where it has to take up its whole line, the whole line by itself, the whole UI space. That way, this is on its own line, the show only last bar. This becomes its own line, and then this gets put into its own line, such as this, where you can now prettify your options up and group them better. So you're welcome to go ahead and just, you know, obviously copy this. I'll put it in my GitHub code changes and you can copy it, or I'll put the link down in the video description of where you can find that file. So that is that. Let me go ahead and change this back. And let's finish up our discussion on enums real quick, and then we'll end the video here. So the construct is, you know, it's of type enum. We've used percent, we've used boolean. This is just enum, and within it, it takes. Let me go ahead and change the formatting. It takes an object, so these curly braces with properties, and you can as many properties as you. I don't know how many. What's the limit? But you can have several. And then there's a comma. So it's an enum takes two arguments, right? It takes an object, and then it takes a default value, and then you got to close the thing, the method call. in our case, it looks funky because of how it's, oops, because of how it's formatted. But here's our object. That's our first argument, comma, and then our second argument is the default enum value, which is s. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. Oops. Close it, and then go back in here to configure it. Select our string, our drop down, and drop down divider. Now we've made it more usable for us and for other people if we're wanting to share it. And that's it. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'm fairly positive this is the final part of this particular series. We'll start a new one soon on how to draw the line segments, just going into more detail of how to use this, as well as other display objects or graphics, drawing things, not just lines, but text, rectangles, circles, and whatever else that works with the Tradovate API. Let me go ahead and close that and save that. All right, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that like button. See ya.